everyone. So let me introduce myself first. So my name is Lily, and I work for ConveyUX as a web developer. And this is Stephanie from France. So she's a French web designer, Pixel and CSS lover, and coffee addict. She focuses on designing for user experience on mobile and web applications, native and responsive web design. She works both in agency in...
À la création.
So I would say it's Strasbourg. But yes, the agency called...
À la création.
Oh yes, sorry. And as a freelance for her little studio in Pizzoli Trust.
Yeah.
Do I say it right?
Yeah.
Cool. So she loves to share her knowledge and ideas and discoveries on various publications like Smashing magazines. And Stephanie also teaches courses on mobile design and optimization and HTML and CSS for beginners at University of Strasbourg. So this is Stephanie and...
Hello. Can you hear me in the back? Yay, cool. Hello. If you like, okay, we're set. We are here today, thank you. There are many talks to speak about CSS animations. I've promised to not put too much code. I hate live coding, so I won't play with anything in the browser. Everything goes on here. I really like this picture because I don't know if you can see it right, but it has this sense of motion. You can guess that she's actually dancing, but on the otherwise it's like starting things. So the human eye really like motion, and that's what we are going to talk about today. So I'm Stephanie. I'm coming from France, hence the weird accent. What you need to know about me, I'm a web designer, so I don't come from a background of psychology, anthropology, and all the really crazy and cool stuff you guys here are doing. I'm the crazy one who thinks that CSS is actually a language made for design. The other thing is I'm used to speak about design in front of developers, and I'm used to speak about code in front of designers. I don't know if it's craziness or challenge, but here I am. So when we think about animations on the web, the issue is that we think about Flash, right? Flash intros, all of those usability nightmare sites. And we had this block, we don't want to animate the web because of those really old Flash areas. But then we've got people like Google, like Apple, that are trying to pave the path of new animations, and they're doing those things in mobile design. If you take a look at iOS 7, for example, they've thrown away all this skeuomorphism stuff, and you've got these nice little sweet animations that actually help the user understand. Same for Android. The last version, Lollipop, it's basically flat design with a little bit of shadow, and this is from the Google guidelines. So basically they've got these huge guidelines on how to animate things to help the user. So mobile paved the path, and we can try to follow this in web design. Before going into code, I wanted to show you some little areas when we can where we can add animation and how we can do this to actually guide users. So meaningful animations that are going to provide a great user experience. The first thing is that the human eye is really quickly attracted to something moving. I was in a conference in France, and the speaker didn't have any slides. So what they did, they just let the conference slides rotate. It's really hard to concentrate on when somebody is saying when you've got all these rotating things. So I'm trying to keep the animation and the video to a minimum level. But anyway, user eyes really like when something is moving, you are going to see it. So you could use it, for example, to draw attention to critical moments. That's CodePen. That's where you will be able to find on my demo. It's basically a little sandbox. It's in the browser. So if you are doing something in CodePen and you forget to save and you refresh or leave the browser, well, you're going to lose everything. So what they do, they gently remind you hey, you might want to save something. Second reminder. And then you even you get a little notice. So draw user intentions to critical things, notifications, stuff like that. You can also like cheat if you've got something that is going to load really slowly. You can draw user attention from the away from the loading time to something more cheerful. Like there are cookies. Like this cute little cookie is going to animate. So no, I'm not waiting for the page to load. I'm like looking at the cute little cookie. Of course, this won't work if the page load is really, really long, but that's kind of the things we can do to like distract the user from the loading and show him nice little animations. Then they tend to decrease cognitive load. Like state changes doesn't happen just like that in nature. You don't go from light to darkness. You've got the sunset and the sun shining and stuff like that. So it's the same for animation. If I'm showing something like this, it feels pretty disruptive. So the change here is like, whoosh, what happened? Where does this come from? What happened with the menu? So really disruptive stuff. I don't know about you, but I really loved doing those little flipbooks when I was a kid. So I would just like draw these little things in the top right corner of my box, and then I would flip through those and basically create an animation. And that's what the brain has to do. He has to train all of those little in-betweens to understand what happened with my menu. So like stage 1, 2, da, 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 da. And if we are creating animations, we are actually helping the brain. So basically here, what happens is that the computer, my browser, is doing all the in-betweens. So my user doesn't have to think about this. Of course, he won't think. It's not like a mental process he's conscious of. But basically, here we are going to help him, like, we are doing the interpolation, and then he just has to focus on something else, like the task he's supposed to do in my, I don't know, that could be a website or something else. So, creating feedback. We spoke a little bit about this morning in the other room. So basically, if you come and ask me a question and I'm like that, you might wonder, did she get it? Did she hear it? What's going on? Is she thinking, yeah, maybe no? So you're lacking of feedback. If I'm like, okay, now you've got feedback. You know that something is going on in my brain, right? You know that I'm thinking about the answer, that I'm going to answer to you eventually when I've got the answer, and stuff like that. And it's the same for interfaces. So feedbacks is a great place when we can add little animations. Of course, there's the button, the easiest way, like do some really nice, cool little things. Here you make the user understand something's going on, like, wait a minute, you've submitted the form, there's something that's going to happen. And user doesn't have to click 10 times, so he knows that that was clicked, so he just has to wait now. I really like that one. It's a little bit geeky. It's a French website for selling socks, and they only sell socks. And when you add something to the basket, you got this little star, like, hey, Super Mario-like. And now you know, your socks were added to the basket, so you can like move on, find other socks, and just order those. So creating feedback and also delight. Creating content relationships by connecting the dots. This iOS does it really well. When you open an application, it's like whoosh, and when you close it, it like goes back to the button. So basically, you understand that those two things belong together. Another example would be this button. If I click here, the button is going to appear. So now my user understands that if he clicks this specific button, the things he just entered in the form is going to be sent. So creating relationships between those two elements by simply animating them. I don't have to tell my user, hey, if you click this button, it's going to send the form. He just understands it by this little cute animation. Provide orientation. That's a hard one. Like, where did this thing come from? Where is it going? Where is my menu? Where are my items? Stuff like that. It's really hard for a user to not get lost in an interface. Especially on mobile, you've got this really tiny little screen, so many things going on here. So you might want to help me establish the physical space of your interface, right? So keep him oriented. A little example here would be if I'm adding some items to this, like cookies and stuff like that. I could animate those. Like, now you know that they are coming from the back, and you just know which one are going away, like that they are red and they are going away this way. So basically, you understand a little bit more the orientation on the application. And of course, you can create pleasure, right? Because pleasure is a really, really huge part of the user experience. You can use animation to craft something unique. It's like these little extra steps. We show to our user that we cared enough to make those. You can, for instance, have storytelling animations, take him through a journey, stuff like that. And you can also like bring delight and pleasure to in the interface. Here again, back to quadrops. If I'm liking something, I would like just click on the like and it would get red. Quadrops goes a little bit further. The more you like it, the bigger it gets, the redder it gets. So this is just delightful, right? You don't need to like make this bigger and bigger and bigger. This is just to show the user like, hey, the more you like it, the bigger it gets. So these little extra steps showing us that those people actually cared about the users and made those little playful things for us to play with. I'm speaking about it here, so I like it. So, and you can give a really sense of uniqueness. I don't know how many of you know the Dots game. It's pretty popular. Here, animation are a complete part of the identity of the game. It's like really minimalistic, few flat colors, and animation give the sense of uniqueness here. So animation can also become part of a brand identity, and that's becoming huge. It's also becoming crazy because how are you going to like communicate those? But that's a big part. Now to the coding part. Okay, nobody left the room. Cool. Since 2011, we've got the CSS Free specification. Who already like played it with a little bit with CSS animations and transitions? Okay. The thing is, we've got two things. We've got transition and animation, and both are animations. So what's this? Transition, animation. Okay, two things doing the same. Not really. Transition basically works like this. You have to tell what you want to transition. Here it's my color property. You set up a duration, and then it's going to do something like that. With transition, you can only go from value A to value B, so from the dark orchid color to the orange one for the same property. So basically, if you want more in between, like I want to have more colors, I can't do this with transitions. So that's the limitation of transition, like value A to value B. You can do something more complex, and this is the CSS animation model. So you have to do two things. The first is declare your animation using those little things like keyframes. You give it a name. You might want to avoid a property, CSS property here, or you might have conflicts. And you say all the stages between 0, the starting point, and 100%. You can have how many you want here. Don't do too much or your browser is going to crash. But basically, you are just telling to the browser how you want it to change from 0% to 100%. And then you are calling the animation. So here I'm calling it on an A element, and I'm giving it a 3-second duration. So it's kind of a little slow. Yay. So I'm able to transition between 3 colors. Browser support, pretty good if you don't have to like this IE9. And you need to prefix the stuff for some WebKit browsers. The thing about prefixing you really need to remember is that if you need some properties to be prefixed as well, you might want to do something like that. So you must not forget that this one needs to be prefixed, but everything inside of those things needs it too. So basically you are going to have to write a lot of code, or you are going to use like auto prefixer and stuff like that that are going to do all the work for you. So, to the demos. The first thing I wanted to show you is providing feedback to users. So, basically, the little button transition. I'm going to transition between 2 colors, white and an orange one. So, this is what it looks like. Okay. The trick here is I want the text and the border to get the same color, right? If you don't specify a color for a border in CSS here, he's going to use the same one as the text. So I'm going to use that. Like, I'm transitioned from white to orange, and then it's going to work also on the border. And then I have to call the transition. So first time I was working with transition, I was like, put it here on the trigger. Like, it felt logical. I want to transition something when I hover it, so I'm going to put it here. The issue with that is that it will transition when we hover it, but when the mouse is not on the element anymore, it will go back really abruptly to the normal color. So you'll have a nice transition when you hover it, and then poof, nothing else. So transition, animation, same thing. What you really have to remember is that you are going to apply those on the normal state and not on the transitioned one. All the demos are online, by the way, so don't worry. I put a great effort into like putting many comments in those, so you'll just have to like read the CSS and you might understand. So again, our first transition, yay! Then I want to add this little push button effect. To do those, I'm going to use transforms. Transforms is a really crazy CSS specification. You can do many things, like transform on both axes, this one and this one. You can do rotation, you can do scaling, you can do 3D stuff like flipping stuff and crazy stuff like that. We are just going to do something really basic. So when I click the button, it's going to just like make this pushed effect. I'm doing this using the active trigger. This is basically when the user clicks, or when you are on the mobile, when the user taps on the button. So there's no like really transition here. But I might want to do a little bit further, like I want to play with this little star. Do something like this. Like make it bigger. I've cheated. The star isn't in the HTML. So with most elements, you can have two pseudo elements for free. You've got the basic element, the button, and then you've got two pseudo classes, pseudo elements, sorry, before and after. So I'm using here the after pseudo class to basically add a little star in it. And the good news is that now you can animate those. The only thing you have to remember for it to work, if you need this order, you need first the button, then the trigger, so here active when I click, and then only will you declare the after pseudo class. And this is going to work. So I'm scaling it, so making it a little bit bigger. So when the user is clicking it, we've got both the button and then the scaling. You might want to ask then if I want this star to stay bigger once the user clicked. Well, you can't, not with transitions. So this is when we are going to need animations in CSS. I cheated it here a little bit again. This time the little star isn't into the CSS, I put it directly into an inline SVG. The cool thing about SVG is that you can then play with them again with CSS. You can animate those, and you can also change color and many other things like that, as long as they are inline. So if I want this SVG element to get the same color as my text and border, I'm going to use this fill, current color, and it's going to use both. And then I'm going to do basically the same animation as before. Like on hover, I change all the colors, so the text, the border, and the SVG, and then it's going to transition. Yay! So back to my little star. I said that I wanted to animate it, so we'll do something like this. Make it a little bigger when I click, right? So how do I do this? 2 steps. First step, I'm going to declare the animation. So basically I give it a name, favorite, looks good enough, and transform scale 1.3, so I make it 1.3 bigger. Then I have to like call this animation on a trigger. Here I don't use the pseudo class anymore, I'm using a class. This is simple. If I'm using a pseudo class, well, when the user doesn't click anymore, the animation goes away. Here what I want is, even if the user doesn't click anymore, I want it to stay. So I'm using JavaScript to add a class when the user clicks, and when he clicks again, I remove the class. So basically, animation works this way. I call the name, I have a duration, And iteration count is how many times do I want to play it. Here I just wanted to play it once. Still doesn't stick, right? Okay. I want something like that. Like, hey, once it's finished, I want the start to stay bigger. So this is done with the animation fill mode property. Basically, what this does is I'm telling my browser here that I want it to apply the last keyframe, so the 1.3 scale, to the animation once it has finished playing. You can use like this. You can say, I want to apply the first one, and you can also want to apply both. So animation fill mode forwards enables me to tell the browser when it's finished, you just like keep the CSS of the last keyframe. Okay? And then I can do something a little bit funnier. Transition or animation timing functions help me like control how the animation should progress through the time. Here I've got the same animation. The only thing is that I'm going to play with the timing function. So basically, they don't arrive at the same time. Linear is like linear. It's like really, really robotic. You might want to avoid this unless it's the effect you want. Is like, hey, quick start, slow at the end. There's also is out, is in, out, so it's both. And you've got steps. Steps is really useful if you want to do spriting animations. So you've got all these little keyframes and you want to make a sprite. Or if you want to do, for example, a clock like tick, 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 tick. This would be done with steps. And I can use cubic Bezier. I have no idea how to write this. Okay, but there are great tools around here. That's one of those. And basically, this is how I want the animation to work. The fun thing about cubic Bezier is that you can go a little bit like over the top of this curve, like that's the top. And you see when I go over it, it goes beyond the animation and goes back to the last keyframe. So if I'm applying cubic Bezier here, I've got this little effect. It goes a little bit beyond, so beyond 1.3 scale and comes back to the normal scale. So with cubic Bezier, you can really do like a full control on the animation, test it, see what feels right, what works for your users, and what gives this sense of really like responsiveness. Questions at the end? Okay. Sorry. Okay. Next thing, the flyout menu. So how can I like give this sense of special indications? First things first, I've got like the menu on the right, the content on the left. Then I need to like hide the menu out of my view. So I'm doing this by translating on the x-axis, like over there. So negative translate. And then when I'm going to hover the thing, it's going to come back. You see that here I'll let a little bit of blue so that the user knows that, hey, there's something hidden over there, so you might want to check this one. So hide it, put it back to 0, and I've got two figures here. So that's a little bit strange, right? It's the short-handed transition property. The first one is the duration. The second one is actually a delay. I don't want my user to hover this and trigger the animation if like by accident. So I'm going to give it a delay, like wait a little bit. If the user really hovers it, like on purpose, I'm going to make it. Otherwise, like it's like 0.25 seconds, so it's really short delay. Nevertheless, it helps not make those mistakes. Then I need to animate the content. Otherwise, you have the menu on the top of the content. So I'm doing the same thing. The translation here. Okay, here I'm giving it the same translation. What you have to watch for is this tilt. This is a sibling selector. Basically, what I'm saying here in plain English, when I'm hovering the menu, I want to do something on the content. So this is the first line, and I'm doing something like that. So now I'm also pushing the content away. And I'm using the same triggers as before to make sure to synchronize it. So same duration, same delay, and also same timing function if you change the timing function. And I can do fun things with this little arrow again. So that's the icon. So basically what I'm saying here is that when I'm going to hover the content, I'm rotating the arrow a little bit, and then it goes back to normal. I put the animation a little bit slower so that you can actually enjoy the arrow moving around. Okay, so last demo. This is like, again, feedback, but also showing you what you can do with a little bit of JavaScript and on animating form stuff. So this is a nightmare. Like, you can't normally do stuff like that. Like, you can't style checkboxes. So what you have to do if you want to style checkboxes is basically you take the checkbox, you throw it away, like you don't see it anymore in my browser, and I'm going to create a fake one. How am I going to do that? Again, I'm going to use a pseudo element here. I think my laser is dead. So basically what I'm doing here, instead of styling the checkbox, I'm creating a fake little square inside my label, and I'm actually going to animate this one. So it has a background, it has a border, right? Now, I want to transition this when the user is going to check this. This is the new cool stuff you get in CSS Free. You can basically see if the user is checking something or not. So when the user checks, it gets blue, and the border also changes. How do I do that? I'm using this little pseudo class. So double point checked. I'm changing the whole thing. And again, I have to apply the transition on the normal one. So this is when it gets a little bit messy with the CSS. But basically, if you read it from the left to the right, it's like, when I'm checking the checkbox, I want to do something on the before fake element I created on the label. And you can change those. You can have like as many transitions as you want. So basically here I'm doing two things. I'm transitioning the background, and I'm also transitioning the border. So you don't need like to transition, transition, transition. If you got many of those, you can use a comma. Then I want a cute little mark. Again, I'm cheating. I'm creating the mark into an after pseudo element. And I'm going to animate it. So this is the CSS Free Nut Selector. So basically, this is in English. When the checkbox is not checked, I want to like scale down the little thing. So if I scale it down to 0, you won't see it anymore. And when it is checked, so I basically just remove the nut, I want to scale it back to the normal stage. So scale it back to 1. And then again, applying the transition on the normal thing. Playing it again. Okay, that's the most complicated CSS you'll see today. Don't worry. And I can do fun things with shakings. Like, if the user did something wrong, he forgot to like fill those fields, I'm going to shake it. So this is my shaking animation. Basically, you've got the form in the middle, 0, so 20%, no, like 0, 20%, 60%, 80%, I missed one. 0, 20, 40, 60, 80, and back to the middle. So I'm just like moving it like that, and this is it. And again, applying it. So again, I'm applying to a class, and the class is added in JavaScript. I didn't write this JavaScript, a friend of mine did. So it's just like checking if everything is okay, and if not, it's just adding the class on the form. Yay! And the two last little properties that are interesting is iteration count. Basically, 1 time, 2 times, 10 times, or infinite. You can do these loop animations. And animation direction. So by default, it's from 0 to 100%, but you could do reverse, like 100 to 0, and you can also alternate. So like go from 0 to 100%, back, forth, and this is how we can do like fun spinners in CSS. So that's really trendy. If you're looking for a CSS spinner on Kotlin, you are going to find many, many of those. So that's the memento. I'm going to go really, really quickly, just more for you when you go home to like, you've got all the properties on one thing. So transition, the property name, the duration, the timing function, delay. Animation, you need two things, declare the animation, and again, we saw all of those except for this one. Play state, basically, if you want to pause the animation, you can use this one. And the triggers. So we saw the hover, the active focus is when the user is going to put the mouse into a field. Checked, invalid, required, all the new cool things that come with form validation in CSS Free. Target, this is when you've got an anchor inside a page, and then you can have JavaScript. So the idea is that I'm building the animations in CSS. I'm simply binding those to a class, and then the JavaScript adds and removes the class. This is because we can't have like blur when the user puts the mouse out of a field, submit and stuff like that don't exist in CSS. So we still need to rely on JavaScript, but not to build the animation, just for the different triggers. And opacity and transform basically come for free, almost. So this is about performances. It's really cool to have nice animation, but if they are slow, it's going to feel sluggish for your user. So you might want to have, you want them to perform well. Those are the two most things that we animate, because those are the ones that the browsers don't require too many resources to use those, to put it like really short. So with great power, stuff like that, Spider-Man, comes great responsibility. We need to use those with caution. The first rule will be keep it simple, like always. You have to ask yourself, does it distract my user? Can they accomplish their task? If no, you might want to provide a kill switch. iOS did that. I think you can like switch up the animation if they really piss you off. So it's, I don't know, in the accessibility options or stuff like that. Then keep it short. Doesn't annoy my user. As beautiful as your animation is, if the user has to watch 3 seconds of animations before he can work or user interface, he's gonna like give up in the end. Does it respond well? Is it like performance? Is it too long? So a rule of thumb would be like go 4 times faster than the animation you built originally. Keep it meaningful. Does it provide something to the user, like meaningful information that it adds value to the interface? And delight is a value, right? But if it only adds delight but nothing else, maybe it's not like the right place to animate. So basically, you need to fit your message. Like, if you don't have a site that is playful, you might not want to have playful animations and stuff like that. So it's, again, like basic design rule, make them fit the whole message, and it will work. So the last part is about communication. Because like I'm a designer, but I don't work alone. I work in a team. I'm like able to create those animations in CSS, but when I work on, for instance, real application, mobile, Android, stuff like that, I don't know how to code, so I need to be able to like tell my developer what I want. What we have to understand is that animation is not like the sugar on the top of the cake. You can't just like come at the end of the project, see your designer like, I'd like some animations, please. That's like worthless animations. You really need to think those through and make them part of the whole process. So how can we do that? Paper prototyping works pretty well for animations. So I've got this one if you want to see it at the end. It's not like free papers, it's the same one. It's for a really complex advanced search. The idea was to go on early stage of the project with this and show it to the front developer and ask him, can you do this? Is it going to work on an iPad? Because the iPad was the target. So basically what I did, it was like, I did like a user testing. So with my colleague, like, okay, do that and that. Then if you want to do this, and he said, okay, I'm clicking here, like, whoosh, this comes here. And then if you click, okay, whoosh, and I showed it what I wanted for the animation. Of course, it's easy to show this to my colleague next to me. It's another story when you want to show this to the client. So, the holy animating gift, yay! So that's what we actually sent to the client to explain to him the interaction stuff. I'm not really good at After Effects, so I did this in Photoshop, but there are many, many tools you can use. You can also like create a video. It's just like the GIF was the most simple format, but video works as well. The idea is, again, a tool to communicate the animation to other people in the team and also to the clients. And then you can, of course, code those animations. So this is a quick and dirty demo just to, again, see if what we wanted to do would work on the iPad and if the user was able to use it. So it works like that. It's not really sexy, not really cool, but the main idea is like, does it work? So again, if you are doing those quick and dirty demo codes, you can basically test those on real users. And I really advise you to like test the animations on as many devices as you can. Android is a mess. iOS, a little bit less. Both are actually working on WebKit, but the WebKit on Android has nothing to do with the WebKit on iOS. So test it, and also test it on users. But not everybody can code. So I put together a few resources. So this is basically 4 different sites where you can go. You can use the code. So the idea is like, first, inspiration. Secondly, see what can be done, actually. So, and then you can use those for quick and dirty prototypes, stuff like that. So it's all free. All the code is available. That's an animation framework. And those other 2, you've got many things on. This one, like model, hover effects, stuff. And this one is only about hover effect on the little buttons. And then, of course, there's inspiration. So these are 4 sites you can go for inspiration. The idea is, again, not to copy what other people are doing, but to take a look. So if you see those, you see that actually somebody can do this. So there's no technical issue to do those. Well, theoretically. But again, find inspiration, see what other things, what other people are doing in the field. And if you want to go deeper, there are 2 great women who you might want to follow, so Rachel Nabors and Val Head. They both published on their website some resources about animation, so here you'll find talks, paper, also like resources. Google has a really nice things about web fundamentals and animations, and those 2 are some academic paper. So that's for the first part about cognitive load and stuff like that. And you can find the slide online. I hope it's working. Thank you. I have time for questions.